what kind of opportunities are we looking for? Well, let's start by going over a few examples together.
And this is the first example. So Tina Cleary Photography. It's an appropriate font. I've used a lighter weight here, a bolder weight here, so that we don't have to have kind of a jarring space between the two names. You could be forgiven for thinking, yeah, that's fine, that's as good as it could get. But there is an opportunity to do something a little more special and creative. And if we look at this version here, that's something that really excites me. The fact we've kind of got this clever alignment, not easy to pull off, because the first line of this brand name has 4 letters, the second has 6. So it's taken quite a bit of playing around and adjusting things to get the weights to balance and to have this line up so nicely. A few nuances, like the fact if this L wasn't exaggerated, I think that doesn't quite do the same. I quite like the fact you've got this deliberate overlap. You can see it kind of incurs into the I that's above. So an opportunity I found just by playing, by not stopping at the obvious and having a little play around and, you know, thinking what would happen if these were closer in size, if we could massage that letter into the one below it to get something a little different to happen. So that's one example. Here it is on a black background. Simple, but really effective. And for me, this really encapsulates what a Wordmark should do. It should be distinct. Sometimes just typing something out in a particular font isn't enough. But if you can find something that's not gimmicky, but it's a clever way to create an interesting, maybe an interaction between the different words in a Wordmark, I think that can work really nicely. Another example here. So bespoke, will remanufacturing. So they restore wheels, rims to look as good as new. So there's kind of a chrome finish to this. And that could be acceptable. That could be their logo. But again, when exploring some concepts and taking things a step further, I had the idea to, you know, why not actually exaggerate that? Why not fill in this O and have it look a little more like a rim? Give it a really obvious shiny finish. And part of a brief and the brand messaging was we had to really hammer across that this is going to look as good as new. So we wanted a logo that, you know, really strongly conveyed a sense of that. And here, was it necessary to do it to 2 of the letters? Well, no, actually, I much prefer this version. And this is the version we went ahead with, where we've just filled in the O. No need to do it to the B as well here. So that's it. No need to do it to every letter and to make it maybe difficult to read. Just a little touch that gives it that distinctive flair. It gets the message across clearly, and you've then customized something. And it's not just, you know, text typed off the shelf. So these are the kind of opportunities we're looking for. Another one here. So again, the luxury property show. The tagline is, you know, bordering on the point where I say to a client, "I'm sorry, we can't do this. It's going to be so difficult to read at small sizes." But they assured me this version of a logo would be used, you know, on large banners or magazine covers. It wasn't going to be used at small sizes. But this could have been, again, the final logo. And I really like this concept to customize it. So just taking the angle of the X, of the Y here, and subtracting away from those characters. There was a concept behind this, the kind of luxury sash that would sometimes in ribbon go across things. So there was a deeper meaning behind it, but on the surface level, we've just taken something that, you know, is fairly generic, and we've added something a little more memorable to it without negatively affecting it, without reducing its legibility, and without breaking something that was looking good to begin with. So that's a key. You've got to look for opportunities to enhance, not just to decorate. But this, I think, works really well. And if we come down here, there's a version we've decided to take a second piece out of the L rather than the 1, just to make it really distinct. And you can see actually up here, I've staged that, just placing a stroke over the top of the text. And then here, this is outline text. And I'll show you actually quickly how to do this in case it's a technique you'd like to replicate. So we'll start with a stroke. We can't see if it's white, so let's use perhaps a medium grey. Get it to the weight we're looking for. And obviously I've already reduced this, but let's say we wanted to reduce from this section up here. Make sure your type is outlined. The shortcut for that is Control or Command Shift and O. And when your type is outlined, you then need to expand this stroke. So Object, Expand, and OK. And then select those two objects, and you can use the Shape Builder tool, Shift M, and simply hold Alt to subtract the portions of your choice. That's remove the serif, but if we had done that further down here, a much easier selection to make. So that's it. And using that, you can quite easily subtract one shape from another. So that's another little opportunity you can sometimes look for. None of these are rules. There has to be meaning and something more behind it than just doing it for the sake of it. But these are the kind of opportunities that we're looking for. So let's come on now to the brand I'm working on in this class, and that's Maison Magritte. And I've taken this concept where we had the S's facing, and how would I take this a step further? Well, perhaps this is good enough. No need to to overdo it. I did have a little idea here for perhaps a submark, and we'll come to submarks in a later lesson. It's quite interesting. It's something brands will often need, but you can take whatever distinction you've added, whatever you've included to make your wordmark more unique. Sometimes you can just extract that, and it may be a few characters, and then that can stand alone. In fact, let me just increase the contrast here so you can see it clearly. And that's something that can then stand alone on social media. That's simply the I, which I've elongated a little so that it fits better aesthetically, and then those two facing S's. And that's quite a nice little standalone submark there. So the difference, I think, between a submark and let's say this was a permanent fixture of the logo. Let's say this was your logo lockup. Well, then that's really your brand mark. There's lots of different names and it's confusing for these things. But for me, the difference between a submark and just the symbol of a logo or the brand mark portion of a logo is that it's not included. So this is the full logo as it should be used. And then separately, this is the submark. But we're going to come to that in a later lesson. This is another way you can customize things. Now, you've got to be careful with this. It's not always going to be appropriate. And of course, you can't always have these textures. Although this has been done live in Illustrator, and actually you can export a vector version of this. If I go to, where's my transparency panel, and I release, this is just a clipping mask. This actually has, all the properties of a vector graphic. It can be stretched and blown up. The texture is, super high res, but you've got to be careful and quite likely you'd have to give your client a version that has the texture but also doesn't have the texture. But because the nature of this brand is that they do luxury clothing, but specifically this kind of tweed boucle, to overlay the logo in that texture, is a really nice nod for this particular brand. So textures, there was a time you would avoid using texture in logos, but more and more commonly, as long as you're providing a plain color option as well, using a texture is acceptable. It's becoming more and more acceptable in modern times. There's a version that's reversed on black. If you're interested in doing this yourself, all you need, I'll just release this again, is a source texture. Your logo artwork needs to be outlined, so you can't have any live text, and you just drag, it can be fairly roughly, and position your texture. Just make sure there's nothing sticking out, that it completely covers it. Drag to select both the texture and underneath, and it's important it's underneath, we have the logo artwork, and simply in the transparency window, click Make Mask. And that's it. And if you click Invert Mask, you can see you've got the option to either reverse it out or have it shine through. So quite an effective way of adding something distinctive. Again, it won't work for all logos, but in certain cases, it could be just what you need. Let's spend a little time just looking at script fonts and how we can customize these. Now, if you're doing hand-drawn scripts, real hand-drawn logos, then this isn't the course perhaps to teach you how to expand that skill further. But if you are using existing fonts and you're using script fonts and then perhaps just manipulating them, you might be surprised to learn there's a lot you can do before you outline the type without having to tweak any anchor points. So first of all, glyphs. That's a useful quick tip. If you're not sure what glyphs are, if you select a character, Illustrator will often offer a few glyphs at the bottom here, if it has any embedded in the font. And by clicking one of these, you can see we can actually switch. And this font includes not one, but two different styles of M. It's got quite a few different versions of A here. And sometimes the difference is these little ligatures that join one character to the other. But as you play with these, just selecting and looking at the options, what a difference. Unfortunately, you have to select one character at a time. And these won't all play together as you want them to, but look at that. What a difference, even though we're using the same font, between that. I think the A is a little much, but look at that. And then if I go back and just compare it to the original. So for me, that's a great tip. And as soon as I discovered the world of glyphs, it opened up all sorts of opportunities I didn't even know were there. Of course, this is kind of a quick access to the glyphs. You can actually open up the glyphs panel if you go to Type and Glyphs. And then from here, you'll be able to see the full library. You might have to increase the sample size. And there's a lot to look through, often special characters. But it's well worth having a look sometimes. Not all of the variations will come up as these quick suggestions. So glyphs, that's your quick tip if you're working using scripts. And there might be a lot more to your typefaces than you realize were there, hidden away in the back end. Now, lastly, because I'm conscious of the time we're spending on this lesson, we just want to look at some existing famous Wordmark logos and just identify why they work well and maybe how we can look to do something similar in our own work. So this is a very famous and successful script logo. I don't think they used the font. I have a feeling this one was hand-drawn for Disney, but it's simple and it's unique. A script, handwriting, there's some very positive symbolism behind that. Facebook, when you look at it, not much customization at all. I believe they have kind of leaned away from the closest matching fonts, but it's quite a basic logo when you look at it, and yet look how successful this has been. So you don't always have to add something fancy or clever or unique. Sometimes the strongest word marks, they just have really subtly perfected detail or a completely custom font. Google, likewise, although the color is what really makes this feel unique. This is the latest iteration of their logo. Kellogg's is another very big brand. Again, I have a feeling this was hand-drawn type created just for them. And in fact, I think it's got almost 100-year history with the brand. Subway, this is a more recent iteration, and they've included, these little arrows were part of the previous iteration of their logo. They simplified and flattened it now, but the arrows are still there. Zara, again, this had mixed reviews, but it's simple. Quite clever that they've chosen to overlap. The A gives it a contrast between these thick portions of the characters and this thin portion. So that creates quite an interesting overlap. And no spacing there at all, negative spacing. Now we touched on submarks, and we're going to come back to that in a future lesson in creating our own submarks. But let's look at the theory behind it now. For Disney, although they rarely use it, this is actually a standalone D that they can use to represent the brand. And that is, of course, simply taken from the first letter of the word Disney. The same for Facebook, it's just the F, and they often reduce that from a color block. Google, it's the G from their regular wordmark. So this doesn't sit in addition to Google. You don't have a G floating above the logo. It's interchangeable. So it's a submark. They divided it quite interestingly with their brand colors, but it's quite simple. The Subway submark. So that's something new they've created that gives them some additional opportunities. So we will circle back to look at submarks again in that lesson. But for now, let's go back to this process of manipulating and looking for opportunities. And this is something I've created here. I'm going to take it in the next lesson into Adobe Fresco, and I'll show you another interesting technique you can use to explore customizations on your word marks and your fonts.